Well, hello, very beautiful community. I am doing my best to keep up health wise, and one of the questions I'm getting a lot on DMs and emails is MAGA going to start imploding in 2025? Which I think is partly a real question that people are asking, but it's partly a wishful thinking way of asking, is the US going to have a democracy in 2028? And I think that while of course the answer is we don't know, there is a lot reassuring stuff that we can say. And it really depends on two things. It depends on how the Democrats react, and it depends on what kind of project Trump will end up elaborating. So, as far as how the Democrats will react, I'm split. And I'm split because I'm skeptical about an adequate reaction. But I'm, without any doubt, clear that the potential for a very compelling and competitive reaction is really there. Because you have got a country that's very split, with a large minority feeling dismissed and economically stuck, and feeling like their institutions don't make sense anymore. All of these problems of trust we've talked about. These are not people who are part of a cult, despite what online liberals like to say. Some verge on that. But on the whole, you have got dejection, despondency, feelings of betrayal, desperate magical thinking driven quest for liberation, also a little bit of outrage and lashing out. These are reachable people. The majority of them are reachable people. So that's to say you absolutely have an electorate to play with. There is no doubt about that. There is no kind of catastrophic split in the country that means that the numbers the Democrats need aren't accessible to them. In fact, with a proper anti-Trump politics, but a pro-Trump voter politics, you have everything to play for, right? So this is not a situation of famine of political resources. There's an endless wealth of political resources there to be exploited and taken advantage of for the benefit of the country. I'm skeptical that that can be realized, but it is enormously available. So that's one kind of conversation. The second conversation is, what will Trump do? And you and I have already been... Oh, by the way, let me just say that I would like to approach what the Dems should do in the following way. A, it's not a conversation about America, because a lot of these are reproducible challenges that really apply to European democracies as well. So we're actually all, as it were, using America to think about ourselves wherever we are. And I apologize to the beautiful community that is in the States that we're partly doing that, but unfortunately the global waves of democratic recession are affecting us all in different but also hugely similar ways. And what I'm going to do is one by one introduce a set of approaches that I think a constructive politics would deploy, and then maybe I'll do some kind of main channel video to summarize that at some point. Now, on to Trump. One theme we've repeatedly sort of touched on is that Trump knows he failed to form an elite around him. And the question is he going to try to do that better this time? And the answer to that is yes. The next question is he going to succeed? And the next question, does he even understand what it means to do that properly, right? Because it's one thing to form an elite around him that sustains a kind of political movement in power that could be passed on to J.D. Vance for 4 or 8 years, for instance. And it's another thing just to say, well, the last time I tried this, I got co-opted and I hated it. So now I'm going to do it in a rebellious way that simply just pushes back against everything that I experienced last time. And I'm going to propose all of these sycophantically loyal amateur hour appointments that are outraging even many Republicans. That's not necessarily going to be a way to sustain an elite around him, actually. So that's going to be absolutely crucial. Is Trump going to have an erratic term, a term of erratic behavior, or is he going to be more strategic about keeping power, not in the dictatorial sense, but in the sense of a movement that could then sustain itself into further electoral victories? We will see, but the odds that things will begin blowing up are considerable, and the odds that rifts will appear between Trump and his supporters are also considerable, especially if they are effectively utilized by the Democrats. So that's one question about Trump, right? Are we going to have something erratic? Or are we going to have something that has a medium-term political vision and sort of sticks to pulling that through? The next question is, how authoritarian is Trump going to try to get? And I believe that getting too authoritarian is going to be incompatible with a project of passing the baton on to a J.D. Vance for 4 to 8 years. So getting too dictatorial and authoritarian is more likely to destabilize Trump than to sustain the presence in power of a kind of Trump clan that follows on from him. If he tries very hard to remake the state in his image, to not stay in power beyond his term, but to make it harder for anybody except his clan to get elected by smashing checks and balances. And when we talk about checks and balances, don't forget, we always name the democratic institutions that are examples of these checks and balances, but there are also democratic rituals, right? So you can actually just degrade rituals and hurt democracy very much that way without muzzling any particular institution. And here there are two thoughts, really, that the institutional resilience of the United States is extremely strong. It's not to be underestimated. And that Trump risks civil war if he tries to become a dictator. What this means for us in the big picture sense, emotionally, I think, is that the huge anxiety that a lot of you are feeling now is an anxiety that I would love you to redirect, at least in part, toward the post-Trump period, right? Because the most constructive thought is, how do we bring it about that there are effective political forces in the United States that can be competitive toward the end of Trump's term? I think that the fear of losing US democracy is, for me, something that is more plausible come the 2030s than it is during this term of Trump's. That's to say that we don't know, right? But the reasonable psychological expectation is that US democracy will have quite a lot still to play for, even if it's damaged after Trump, right? So there will be another and then another attempt to get things partly back on track. And if these next attempts fail, then yes, I would foresee the collapse of US democracy. So I'm kind of redirecting that worry about democratic collapse from the next 4 years of Trump to the 4 or 8 years that follow the next 4 years of Trump. I think loss of US democracy is a more plausible outcome in that period than it is in this period. But I can't rule it out, right? But at the level of not wanting, to set our hair on fire 17 times unnecessarily, I propose that you transfer some of that anxiety to a future point, because there's going to be a lot to play for. So this is just schematic and partly just for emotional support, and we'll talk about all of this much more. Lots of love.